Shut up and sit down.
Hi, my name is Adrienne, and I am thrilled and honored to welcome you to season 4 of the Black Women in Europe podcast. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been 4 years of telling our stories, shining our lights, and keeping it real. Do they even say that anymore? Anyway, we're glad you're here and keep coming back. Hi, this is Adrienne, and I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Wellness on the Weekly, 52 fun prompts for mindfulness, movement, and a whole lot less stress. It's available now globally on Amazon. Hint, the Kindle version has hyperlinks to practices and more. And in the US on barnesandnoble.com.
Shut up and sit down.
Welcome. I'm so happy to have someone back. It's been a minute. It's been more than a minute. This is the fabulous Lisa R. Mitchell. And just when we were warming up, I got her big fancy title and all her work she's doing, and I can't remember a thing. But I'm going to tell you what I can remember is why I wanted Lisa to talk to us during the season of healing. And here we are in November. Financial wellness, that is Lisa's jam. That's her thing. That's her expertise. Financial wellness. That's what we're going to talk about. So Lisa R. Mitchell, thank you for squeezing us in. I know we have a hard stop at the top of the hour. Welcome to Black Women in Europe, season 4.
Thank you, Adrienne. And it's always a pleasure to be here to speak with you, to speak with your group, Black Women in Europe. I am Lisa R. Mitchell. I'm currently the principal of Living a Global Lifestyle, which is a global community and brand for expats, digital nomads, and global travelers. And I just want to help people who want to live a global lifestyle live their best life. So I try to talk about everything. I especially focus on finance because for a very long time, I was an international banker helping people, excuse me, sorry about that, for people who want to live a global lifestyle. So I worked at Citibank, I worked at Wells Fargo, specifically on people who wanted to move abroad. So there really aren't that many specialists who do that, especially anymore, because now we have the Revoluts, we have the Wises. So I did that. I've been a perennial expat. I mean, you and I met when I visited you in Sweden. I've lived in London twice. I've lived in Vietnam. I've lived in China. I've conducted business in several countries when I was an international banker, going all over the world, finding customers and building deals with financial institutions. I've been a corporate trainer in Shanghai, where I focused on helping global leaders. So since I've been stateside the last couple of years, I've built up Living a Global Lifestyle. So I'm happy to be here and talk about financial wellness. It's almost the end of the year. We know wellness is always important. But of course, on November 5th, it's almost tomorrow going to be 2 weeks, which is so strange. The whole world changed. And I think no matter what side of the aisle you're on, we can agree, I think everyone, that if everything or even a fraction of what the new administration says will happen is going to be a systemic change and a systemic, right? So the New York Times took my words for that. So it's going to be huge. I mean, I already see financial institutions hailing less regulation. I already hear a lot of chatter, people asking from a financial aspect, what does that mean? What should we do? How should we prepare? I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about the FDIC might go away or it might change, and people are really worried about that. In terms of the expat space, US citizens, US permanent residents, we're taxed on worldwide income. And one thing the new administration did say, and they said this in 2016, is that they support residence-based taxation, which a lot of groups have been trying to get. That would be huge. That I can't even, begin to understand. I'm keeping my feet to the ground. So would that also mean no FACTA? Would that also mean no FBAR, resident-based taxation? How's that going to impact IRS and revenue? So, and is this going to be a stroke of the pen on the first day, the first quarter? what's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty, especially around finances. But I'm also a big believer in just a few things, right? In chaos, there's always opportunity, right? So, and I think that you should never make any type of move, from an emotional standpoint. I've seen a lot of people the last 2 weeks just saying, I want to leave. I want to get out of here. Especially people of color, I got to leave. Well, I just spent the last couple of months in the last year traveling around the world. When I don't live overseas, I usually try to travel for a couple of weeks. Everywhere in Europe, especially, everyone's talking about the inflation. Everyone is talking about healthcare. Like in the UK, people were telling me they don't think the NHS will even be here in 10 years. So, and we also know there's a wave of conservatism all around Europe, Italy, Hungary, and some other countries. So this is really kind of going to be what I feel a global issue. And for good, bad, or indifferent, the United States is a global world power. And, we have global responsibilities. So I like to say, what's that saying? When the United States sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold. I think it might even be worse than that now. When the United States sneezes, the rest of the world gets pneumonia. The good news
Well,
on that,
Lisa,
go ahead, go
w-
ahead.
well, I was gonna say, you know how we say when America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia.
Yeah.
So how does that fare for our communities in general, um, in this new environment?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing to see is that the focus, what is the focus? What's besides the getting rid of the bureaucracy and everything, the focus is on the very wealthy. That the focus is. So I'm telling folks, if ever there was an opportunity or a chance to build your financial war chest, and to do, people talk about side hustles, which I don't really like that term. I prefer the term multiple sources of income, and get your financial house in order. It's now. Okay. And for everybody, that will look differently. Now we can go on and on about, people were concerned. I've heard so many stories, and I've been mostly silent. Oh, and inflation and prices are going to go down, maybe in the short term, but already economists are saying if everything happens the way that the new administration wants, those things, it will just get worse before it will get better. So we need to prepare for that. I see a lot of people stockpiling, which I think is not a bad idea. I'm doing that with my family, right? Stockpiling on our basic staples and our basic needs and things that we need in case the prices go up next year. Within reason. Maybe you've seen that famous story going around about the woman's husband. The boss calls them all into the office and tells them they're not going to have a Christmas bonus because of the tariffs, and they want to pre-buy everything. I think that could be a real scenario for a lot of people. So maybe you should be going to your bosses, whatever industry that you're in, and saying, what is the company? I think that's a legitimate question. What is the company doing now? So it's not just what are you going to do, but what is your company? Can you share with us your plans of if things, manifest the way that they're supposed to? What things are the company doing, and how will that affect employees? And then you can act accordingly. But I'm saying to everybody, if there was ever a time to build a war chest, save, 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 which is not always easy, save and budget. This year I pretty much became debt free. And I can tell you from my own experience, trying to budget, trying to track. And I'm not one who's kind of big for tools because I like the hands on, I like to see it written down. It's not easy, but that's a skill that I would say everyone needs to develop. For expats, always ask me, should I move abroad when I have debt? Now, I've moved abroad when I've had debt. I'm a big believer in nothing should stop you. But interest rates right now are low in the US and in other countries. So if you have an opportunity to pay off your debt, I think that that's something that you should do. So that's kind of I hope I answered your question,
No,
Adrian.
yeah, that's fantastic, Lisa. No, that's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic advice because I have not seen that question about asking, about a Christmas, what may not
Mm-hmm.
happen for
Yeah,
Christmas.
it's a
Because you know what, I thought
famous.
Christmas bonuses and things were the thing of the past anyway. I know Christmas parties were. I didn't know they still had them.
Well,
So
if I was, I'd be asking, but you're right, but I would be asking about my bonus for next year because those decisions are kind of made this year sometimes on this result. I would be, I understand what you said, but I think it's a good thing to ask your company, what preparations they're making in general. But I hear you on bonuses, but every
no,
company
I think
is
that's
different.
excellent. No, I think it's
Mhm.
excellent, and especially if you're in sales across industries.
Yeah.
Whatever industry you're in, somebody's selling something. So
Mhm.
those jobs are often tied with bonuses. Um, and I guess you've seen. Okay, so we're talking about financial. When you say um, fill your war chest, what exactly does that mean? Because that's like a cliche or a term people hear. But to the
Mhm.
uninitiated, what exactly does that mean?
Money, 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 cash, right? Cash. How much cash do you have on hand? So I did my whole list, right? So I've talked about diversifying income streams. I'm really, really big on that, especially the expat community. People always ask, well, how much money should I take to move abroad? I don't know. How much should Adrian take? How much should Lisa take? How much should Bob take? I find that, and this is why I'm not a big fan, okay, the budgeting, the tracking tools, most people don't even know their numbers. And when I say your number, what is that monthly minimum income that you need to hit, regardless of whatever is happening in the world? So if you want to move abroad, can you move abroad and not have anything lingering from your home country, right? Could be student loans, which is about to blow up. So let's say that's 500. Then, moving abroad, okay, everybody's into the cheaper, less, whatever. Let's say it's 500. And then always add a slush fund to that. So you're already at 1,000, add a slush fund to that. Let's just say, I don't know the percentage. You're going to add another 250. So you're already at 1,250, right? So that's how much you have to make every month to meet 1,250, right? And then let's say you like to have saving. I'm not big on emergency saving. 3 to 6 months never sound cool to me, but I think it's where you are. I like a year, right? A year to 18 months. And this is where people get scary because if you take the 1,250 and you multiply it by 12, that's a big number. And people, oh no, I don't want to take, I want to just move over abroad with 300. Well, again, what are your other sources of income? Maybe if you're going to be working abroad and you have income, but even that, I met so many, I could talk about getting paid abroad. That's a whole other podcast, right? Um, that's a whole other podcast about the different ways not to pay people when you work abroad. And how many of us, my colleagues and I, we lived on our savings, right? And I always tell people savings is not income, it's just that savings to bail you out. So I would say, right, war chest is building your emergency funds, cash, making sure that you have a reliable, consistent income, which if you're not working a 9 to 5, despite what people think about influencers and digital online, can be a challenge, especially like you just said, if you're a newbie, right? But if there was ever the time to look at where you can get started, how you can get started, I don't care if you do TikTok, YouTube videos, read, whatever, you should be investigating that now, right? You should be investigating that now. I'm also big on not just cash. If you're into crypto, maybe it's the time to look. One of the reasons I say that is because they're already predicting, and I guess the new administration has said that they're open to, working more with crypto. I think he's already said that he's going to fire Gary Gensler, who was head of the SEC, which everybody kind of sees as someone who is against, opening up the door to crypto. So if that's something that you're interested in, I would just say read and make sure you
Now, is it
understand.
not too late? Is that not one of the things that it's too late to get into crypto?
But no, it's not too late to get into crypto. No, it's
So
never
that's good
crypto. You're
news.
seeing Bitcoin has gone up to what is it, 80 or did it? I think it's over 80. The other thing we had talked about this before when I did a podcast with you, and people always laugh at me. Gold, other alternate investments. Remember, I'm saying educate yourself. Now, remember how people would laugh and financial advisors say it has no intrinsic value. They're selling gold bars in Costco.
Okay, wait a second. It's so funny you say that because yesterday watching, hanging out with my mom, watching football. There was a gold commercial every other commercial.
Really?
U.S. Is it U.S. Um,
You,
I don't want to
uh,
say it's U.S. Mint, but U.S. might be.
yeah,
But it,
yeah,
yeah, there. But wait a minute,
yeah.
Costco
Interesting.
is because really
Costco sold
Costco.
out on selling gold bars. I missed it last year. They sold out. And then I think, and I forgot to double check, but I think now they're also selling platinum bars. Almost pretty sure.
So I mean, at a disc. I mean, Costco is known for selling things in bulk and at a good price.
Right,
So
right.
this,
Don't good
how did,
question. I don't know why they started. I don't know. Good question. But I know they were sold out. And this may be going on 2 years, Adrian. Not 1 year, maybe going on 2 years.
okay.
So
So it's not so.
these are
Let's
things.
just recap so far. So get us
Mhm,
get multiple streams of income. Stop calling it a side hustle because
that's
you'll
right.
take it whatever.
Hmm.
It's a side hustle. It's I don't know if that could have a negative connotation or I don't know, but it's not a side. It's something that you're good at. It could be,
Hmm.
it's nothing wrong with having a 9 to 5, but for multiple streams of income, an easy way to branch
Hmm.
out if it's something that you're good at that you're interested in or whatever.
But
There's that's
alternate, sorry, it could also be real estate investing, right? Passive income with
thank you.
that, right? It could also be that. It could also be royalties for something from something else, from music or for other things. There's a company called Public that does alternative investments. I'm trying. I don't want to misquote because I'm actually have a small investment in it, but you need to start searching for things like that. And I do have a list, and I can send it to you of the different sources of income. I keep a running list, so it doesn't necessarily. Some people, not
Fantastic.
every may say I'm not good at having an online business, but you can't just these days. You can't just have your 9 to 5. That's you just
Bottom
you just
line,
can't.
one stream of income is passe. So
I like that.
so we're
I like
moving
that.
forward, right? We said we're not going back. We're moving forward. So
That's
okay,
right.
so
That's it.
so as far as investing, Bitcoin is
Cryptocurrency, not
cryptocurrency,
just
I should
Bitcoin.
say. That's right,
Yeah.
cryptocurrency. Chris cryptocurrency
Crypto, the
is
digital assets. Yeah.
still, yes, it's not too late to get into that market. We were
Yeah.
saying real estate in certain places could be a source of
Hmm.
passive income. Okay, I just wanted to recap because you were dropping a whole bunch of nuggets. So recap.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, where are you on your list?
So, so we did debt. We did diversifying income streams. Our war chest, which includes building emergency funds. Um, I have down here your credit score. I'm also a credit trained banker. Credit score is important in the US because money doesn't make the world go around in the US. Credit does. You've already heard bankers chomping at the bit. Oh, we can offer more credit. It's not always that in other parts of the world, but if you do have a credit history in your country and that's important, you should be reviewing it. But that kind of goes hand in hand with debt. I say if you're in the US because US credit histories generally don't follow you abroad. Um, and I'm seeing some folks, let me just say this. I know this is a savvy group. I'm seeing people who they're abroad and countries are asking them, let's say, I just saw someone purchasing a house in whatever country, and oh, yeah, they took my US credit score. Really? How did they get your US credit score? So there is a company that I know but they work with credit bureaus, right? It should be credit bureau to credit bureau. How is this country even interpreting your credit score? And what about data privacy? And I've seen, I always tell people, I have seen the back office of banks in so many countries. I would not give it. I just like, I'm opposed to it. I see a lot of the millennials, and this person said, I just gave it to them. You just gave them your US credit scores and they know how to
Oh
interpret it,
wow.
they know how to read it. They're
Why
using the
even
same
bring it up?
standards, right?
Yeah.
Why they have the same standards. A lot of countries have different standards of credit. But this is something I see trending, and I don't understand it. If it's International Credit Bureau, the credit bureau in France talking to the credit bureau in the US, that's a little bit different, right? And then some banks like HSBC used to have their own, I think they still have it, kind of internal credit, American Express for certain countries if you have a US American Express. But those are programs and that's internal, that's different, and hopefully they have the safeguards for that. But giving your credit report just to any bank, and I didn't even ask her if it was a bank or a lender, I assume, right? But I don't know. I find
No,
that a little
no,
bit
that gives me the
troublesome.
chills. Yeah, it gives me the chills. It's
I
just
find it a
thinking
little troublesome, but I mention it because a lot of people, it's trending. I've had a lot of people kind of tell me off about it. Well, what's the big deal?
well,
They
you know
can
what? I
look at my
even locked
US.
my credit report at my parents
Oh,
years
what
ago.
you should do before you move abroad, right? Lock it and put alerts on it. Absolutely.
Years ago, yeah.
Right. But
Okay.
a lot of people, so I want to mention it. Along with building our war chest, right? We're creating our list. We're going over everything. So that includes retirement and estate planning, right? What are you doing for that? If you're an expat, the most important thing I always tell people, US, have you read the tax treaty between the country you're moving to and the US, right? That usually we'll talk about how retirement accounts are handled. A lot of people, there's another thread going on. Oh, they don't tax Social Security. They don't US Social Security. They don't tax pension. That's not every country. Every country does it differently. So you need to look into it. And it often changes. So this is a good time. Financial wellness, retirement planning, estate planning globally. A lot of talk lately about repatriation of remains, right? Because expats with the digital nomad and visas, retirement visas, now you're going overseas, you're older. What happens if you die abroad? What happens if you get seriously ill abroad? You need an insurance plan that covers them. And that requires a lot of research and planning because a lot of them are far and few between and they require underwriting. People getting confused. Oh, I'll just buy this, digital nomad. That's insurance. That's not the same as having a comprehensive expat global plan. And a lot of people, I think, tend to think, well, most people think, oh, nothing bad is going to happen to me, right? Or they think, oh, well, if I get sick, well, what's sick? Right? Is sick oh, and it's cheaper and it'll be better. Well, right? My example, I had a major organ, right? So that was mid 5 figures. Yes, in the US, it would have been maybe 6 figures. That's still a nice amount of money. I know somebody who had something similar in China. That was 6 figures she was saving for something else. Sure, in the US, it might have been $500,000. That's still 6 figures. That's 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 still six
Well, you
figures.
bring up something important. People never think about being sick. So I just want to say something. Get ask you to clarify some terms again. Estate.
Mm-hmm,
You said to make sure you do your estate planning and retirement. I think
mm-hmm,
everybody knows what retirement planning is.
mm-hmm.
But what's the difference between retirement planning and estate planning? How about
Right,
that?
retirement planning for the day when you'll no longer be in the workforce, right? And what tools do you have? I shouldn't say, well, I use tools, right? Your 401k, your IRA, if you're going to have a pension, your US Social Security, if you're paid into it. And how is that going to translate abroad? Excuse me. How is that going to translate abroad, right? So that's what you should have your eye on. Again, it's like sources. Okay, so if you're going to retire abroad, what are your sources of income? So those would be your sources of income, right? US Social Security, possible pension, savings, if you've done 401k, IRA, and all those things are going to be taxed if you're living in another country. So that's the retirement part. Estate planning. What's going to happen when you're no longer here? What do you want to happen to your assets? Right? When you're no longer around. Do you want them to go to the state? Do you want them to go to the government? Do you have a relative? Are you living in is your estate plan, your trust plan, which I'm starting to find out that a lot of trust plans in US trust plans in foreign countries are taxed. But that's something you need to sit down, you need to research, and you need to plan when you're no longer here. And of course, what's going to happen to you if you fall and hit your head and you're abroad, If you're single or even if you're you need to think about that. Nobody wants to talk about will planning and trust planning, but I always tell people, whatever you've worked for, don't you want to decide who it will go to? If you wanted to go to a tree, that's a decision you're making, right? You don't want just it to, oh, well, let the state or let the government, you want to have some, I think people tend to think, oh, especially in our community, oh, I don't have a lot of money. It's not about having a lot of, you're paid into the Social Security, and not just US, it could be globally. You've worked for your pension. That's yours. That, when people go, oh, it's not really a lot of money. I really, yeah, it really bothers me when people say that. This is something they've worked for. Our parents' generation, they worked the 30, 40, and 50 years, right? So they're really paid
For
in. So
the
you really
same
need to,
employer. Yeah,
right,
no, but for
right.
the same employer, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because here
So
it is
you really think about
now,
it.
countries in Europe, in US, but they don't want you to retire before what, 67, 70 these days. So our
Well, I mean, I thought,
grandparents and parents, they retired at 65, right? Pretty much.
well, I
Sweden,
mean,
I
in
think,
my,
is up to 67 now.
oh, sweet. That's for Europe. That's
That's
pretty
what,
good. That's
well,
because
but I
Europe
was
used to
surprised
be,
that they bumped it up.
yeah, because remember the crisis with the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain,
Well, they were
a couple
always
of years
low,
ago.
but
Right. But it was
but
because people did their 20 years, 25. And so paying for that, they didn't work past 20, 25. That was a big part of it. You're
but I
paying
also
people's
wonder, did
pensions.
they start working earlier in life?
I
Because those
think they
weren't
did. They did their
necessarily college educated.
20, 25. That's what I remember reading. 2020. Even in China, like,
Well, if you retire
what
at
was it?
50,
Yeah.
you're starting to work at, when do you get out of school? 18? You're starting to work at when
Mhm.
you're 18, 20. That's 30 years.
Yeah, that's 30 years. So
If you're not
retire.
college educated and do it.
Right. But
But
I always
yeah,
say too, retire and do what? And people are living longer, right? That was
hmm
also a generation. You retired, maybe you help with the grandchildren. Now birth rates around the world are very low. There are no grandchildren, right? Even in China,
that's
that was
why
a problem. That's why
immigrants are needed. But yeah.
and why everybody started to get a dog, because they're like, that's my new baby, because my kids don't want babies.
Oh, there are a lot of
That's
dogs
a
in
whole other.
China.
They started because their kids have had the freedom. They're like, I don't want kids, right? And also remember, it's multi-generational. So you might be taking care of two sets of parents, and maybe it's the grandparents, and you add children. Remember, the government changed the law, so you could have more than one child. Birth rates around the world globally are low, so that's a whole other problem, right? That's a whole issue. So estate planning. Just wanted to also add understanding the tax obligations, right? As I said, the new administration has said they support residence-based taxation, which U.S. expats have been pushing for.
They
Now
said
I'm
that in
hearing,
2016 as
but
well.
he also said, right? Well, he said that this time too. I agree, but I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what could happen? Who knows?
I know. I
Who
just don't
knows?
want anybody to
Right?
get their hopes up because he said it in 2016 and had 4
That's
years
a
and
good
it
point.
didn't happen.
Right?
So don't get your, this isn't like, oh, a new idea. He's promised it
Right? And also
before,
too,
so don't
is
get
it
your
is
hopes
it
up.
low on the totem pole? Right? Is
Well,
it?
unless Elon Musk or somebody's asking for it, I don't. And speaking of, he's an immigrant, right?
Yeah, he's originally from
So,
South Africa via Canada, I think.
right. So immigrant, however, coming from South Africa to the United States means you're an immigrant. People, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean you're coming, that's over a border, whether you come from a plane. Some people think
Mm-hmm.
immigrants are just, I don't
No, I
know,
know. There's a whole
coming in
debate
boats
about.
or by foot,
Yeah.
what that means. But
No, you're right.
and I don't know. If people check the sources, find out. Somebody said at some point it was illegal, and I don't like that term, illegal immigrant. But what did that mean? Maybe his papers weren't in order at some point. Well, let's just find
Uh-huh.
out. And maybe if that's true, he could be an influence to be. I'm not sure, but he's got that immigrant story that a lot of people are worried about may happen to them. So
Yeah.
I digress. But to get back,
That's okay.
yes, just so people don't get your hopes up
Well,
because it was a promise in
people are people
2016. So
people
we'll
are
see.
talking about that, and they're saying, what, there, there are a lot of people who are naturalized citizens and things like that. That's a huge debate. I don't think anything has been set in stone. What do I say is they'll probably create a special visa for certain people. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that, right? So certain people can stay and certain people. The whole thing, actually, that whole denaturalization possibility, it makes, I don't even want to talk about it because it's just, it's
It sounds
it's
too
very, very upsetting.
unconstitutional. And then you look at the Supreme Court ballots and you think like, oh God. But yeah, back on track. Hey, but you know what? Let me ask you, and I don't know if this is on your list. Oh
Mm-hmm.
God. Do you have, we talked about emergency, but is there such a thing as like, what if the new administration means you have to leave immediately? Is there planning for, is that like the last thing you're going to
Well,
talk about today?
no, people are doing that. People are talking. I apologize. I thought I'd turn these notifications off. People are talking about that. I'm having those discussions with my family. You have to create your own. You should be creating your own plan, right? Your to go bag, right? What's in your to go bag, right? Is it fireproof, waterproof, important documents, a stash of cash, having a to go bag? Where is the closest country you can get to? Making sure that everybody in your family has passports. I don't think that's, I hear a lot of people talking about it. I do have a resource for a to go bag. I know I put together an emergency medical plan for expats. But definitely everybody should be talking about that. Where is the family going to gather? What are we going to do? Do we have a phone call chain? I had said we should do that during the pandemic, and my family didn't do it. But now I'm like, this is something that we should do.
Well, you know what,
You know,
Lisa, it's like, and I hope people that live in places prone to earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes,
mm-hmm.
already have those plans in place for their families, hopefully.
Right.
And if they don't, and they've lived through it, I think they like, okay, we've got to have something. But you're right. We should, everybody, and people do scofflaw. Unless I remember the first time I moved to California and at work, that was part of your training or orientation,
Mm-hmm. Me
what to
too.
do in a, yeah. And I never
Yeah.
thought about it before. And then I lived in Virginia Beach and there was a hurricane and we were taping up the windows and doing all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to prepare like we're going to have a hurricane or we're going to have
Mm-hmm.
a
Right.
earthquake at any minute and
Mm-hmm.
be
What?
that type of height and then not fixate on it, just have it done and then exhale and breathe, move on, breathe the entire time,
Yeah.
please, but just get it done and don't fixate on it, get it done and move on. Isn't that a good
I would
tip?
agree. Yeah, I would definitely agree. Don't fixate it. Just make sure it's done, especially for those who have elderly parents. I'm looking at my dad's medicine right now. Do we have a 60-day supply, 90-day supply? Don't forget if you have children, if you have extended family. Like I remember when pandemic came along and I had a connect that was able to get masks. I got masks for my extended family. So, loop everybody in and
Lisa,
think
can
about
I
it.
ask you a
Yeah.
question as a caregiver? Is it, as a long distance caregiver, is it possible that your doctor will, I know my prescription, I have one for cholesterol, it's monthly. I can't stockpile 90 days. Is that
You
an
can't, you
exception
can't,
for
it depends on
elderly?
your insurance. Yeah, it depends on your insurance. Oftentimes they'll give you an exception, like when I travel, right? I usually ask for that. Everybody's insurance is different, but I'm trying, that was a goal of mine because I've got both parents, just trying to get them both up to 90 if I could. So you got to ask the question. But again, Adrian, this requires a lot. You're on the phone with Medicare, you're on the phone with the prescription, you're on the phone with the insurance. These are full employment act, full days things that people that you have to do, which leads me to my next one is financial literacy education. I talked about it a little bit. If ever there was a time to kind of try to find 5-10 minutes. I think AOC, Alexandria Ocasio, she made a good point about why people aren't informed. Who is calling me? They've got the baby on the hip. they're working multiple shifts. They've got a lot of things to do. So, and I understand that. I'm the same way. I've looked at my pile of things, got to find
I
five,
know, I
10,
saw
15
that,
minutes.
and she said that their source of news was her. And she said,
Right,
well, that also meant that the other candidate was that those people's source of news. So they're only
right.
getting what they're getting fed. So that was scary. It's like
Mm-hmm.
people don't have time to research, like you just said. But so
Right.
that's so here's the caveat. For this type of planning for your financial well-being, you have to do the work. There's
Yes,
no
you do.
shortcuts. There's no one size fits all. You have to do the
Mm-hmm.
work. You have to have patience. You have to know it's going to take days to get it done. So you need
Mm-hmm.
to be organized and start. You can't get it done quickly. You have to have patience. Lisa, have you found that you can do any of this work online as far as
I do.
actually
I mean,
making changes?
I used to have when I lived in China the last time, every Sunday I would take advantage of the time change. So every Sunday I would sit down and I would like do my finances, figure out what's happening, especially because there's so much fraud. So much fraud. I always wanted to try and stay ahead of it. But I would say definitely, I can put some resources together. What I like, I'm right there with everybody. I'm getting a credential in financial literacy education, but in looking for people, qualified professional people who, I can learn something. Last year, I learned about, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, REITs, REIT, because, the housing market in New York, being a landlord, that's another nightmare I don't necessarily want to go over. So when I hear real estate investing, I kind of go, oh, I don't know if that's something. This gives you an opportunity to do that. So I saw someone who was giving a class. And again, it was just a matter of making a time commitment, listening to the recordings online, Zoom, and just educating myself so I can make an informed decision. So that's what I would
Yeah.
suggest with everything. And that's I heard a lot of that during the financial crowd. The banks robbed us. The bank. When I ask people how, well, what do you know about your money? I don't, have you read your customer manual? Do you know what governs your account? Oh, I don't. Well, okay. You need to be able, and it's not, it's just really educating yourself enough that when you sit down with someone, you know the questions to ask. You don't have to know everything. God knows I won't know everything. Any professionals, just knowing what questions to ask. And I find that people don't know what questions to ask. It's not that there's any question too stupid, but where are you getting your information from? Facebook or someone? I always look at people's qualification. We used to have a joke in Shanghai because it was unregulated at that time, and expats are just seen as having a lot of money, and you would get these calls from these so-called financial advisors, and then what were you doing before that? And as my brother says, you were probably at the fry machine. Nothing wrong with being at McDonald's,
Okay,
working at
that's
McDonald's.
hilarious.
Yeah,
But
but if you're talking to me, I expect you. Do you have any licenses? Are you licensed in the U.S.? Do you have, and people can go on, okay, that's a coastal elite, whatever. You're talking about your money. So you need to be careful, or people who have a lot of experience. Other than that, it just becomes anecdotal, right? My
Lisa, let
favorite
me ask
anecdotal.
you. Okay,
Go ahead.
please tell us the favorite. No, I
My
want to hear
favorite
this.
anecdotal, and I need to write about this because I was just in Toronto. It happened. Oh, do I need to take cash when I travel abroad? I'm just going to take my cards. I'm just going to take my debit and my credit card. Oh, well, this credit works and this works and work. It works until it doesn't work, or you forget like I forgot my Wise card, right? And I didn't really want to get any. I wasn't in Canada, nor wasn't going to spend any money. I didn't really want to get that much foreign currency, but I forgot my card. Luckily, I had put it into my Apple Wallet. So what am I going to do? Not spend any money, not use money, not the exchange rate. People get crazy about that. I always tell people to take a multi-currency, multi-financial solution. Have a debit card, a credit card, have a prepaid card. People just, this is stuff. Anecdotal is, Oh, I used my ATM card and I didn't pay any fees. Oh, I used my credit card. That's anecdotal. I don't think any of us could. How many countries are there officially? Is it 183 or it's definitely over 100? Can say what card is going to be taken in every country at every given moment across the globe. I think that's kind of what I mean by anecdotal. I hope that was clear.
No, it was. It was.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, but the Visa and the MasterCard people don't want to hear you say that. They make you think that their cards is available absolutely everywhere,
Well,
even on
it could
that
be, but it
food
could it
truck.
could not it could not be their fault, right? What if you're
Yeah.
somewhere with the infrastructure is not developed, right? Because this is all now what Wi-Fi that's really what I mean,
Mhm. Oh,
right?
yeah, and
That's
that can
really
go
what I mean.
down. And I'm being
Exactly. That
facetious when I say that because you're right.
mhm,
Nothing is accepted everywhere except for cash,
mhm,
right? Except
exactly
for cash.
right.
But
Cash,
the
right.
but
I've
the
never had
card
anybody turn
companies,
down cash. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
but the card companies would have you think that they have worldwide access. So I'm just being facetious. Now I'm going to ask a stupid question
No, no, go
because
ahead. While I take
I
some
think
iced
part of
coffee.
it, yeah, oh, iced coffee sounds good. And part of it, I think, might have to do with mindset. But what is your advice for people who don't have money?
Well, if you don't have money, how are you making your how are you living? How are you making how are you living? That's a good question. What does that mean, not have money?
Well, I
How are
can't
you
afford
meeting your
to
basic needs?
invest. I can't afford to invest, or I can't
How come you
afford
can't invest?
to,
What does that mean? You can't afford to
well,
buy a
because
$10 stock?
I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Um,
Okay. So that usually means you have to find a way to increase your income, right? They always say you either have an income issue or you have an expense issue. So
I
if
was
you're
gonna
living
say I
paycheck,
look at the expenses too, because where's that? Because most people, like you said, can come up with $10. They're doing
mhm,
Starbucks. I shouldn't say Starbucks. They're doing a lot of, or I should say Americans. I don't know. Have you noticed about Europeans
mhm,
or Asians, or maybe expats wherever we are? Maybe we adapt to our culture, but
mhm,
a lot of money can be saved on spending prepared food out, meals out,
mhm,
for example.
mhm.
You can
Well,
come up
you
with
hit on
$10 a
something
week.
important too, right? I'll take Asia because I've spent a lot of time there, right? Their savings rate is much higher than ours, always has been. My executive students used to routinely laugh at me. Like I used to bring magazines, America's always like, and you can save 10%. They go, only 10? What? Who
Wow.
only saves 10% of their income? Now, that was one of the reasons, like going to Asia for going to China for work. And then I would come back, at that point, that was like 2002 how are all these people getting wealthy? Right? That's a question you need to ask yourself. Well, one, multi generational households, right? In America, we're like
Mhm.
pushed off at 18, right? Live independently. Now you see that's reversing, right? Let's all put our money together to do something, right? But usually going back, you live in paycheck to paycheck, either income issue or you have an expense issue. And hey, I've been there. Sometimes this whole, oh, if you just stop drinking lattes. Well, now that some of these coffee shops are close to $10 for a coffee, that it's a little bit more like, yeah, $10 times seven, that's $70 a week, right?
Okay, now do
So
me a favor. Give an example without naming specifics, but what can somebody do with
mm,
$70 a week
well,
as
$70
for
a
towards
week.
their financial wellness? Yeah.
First of all, $70 a week can help you start building your emergency fund, right? So it goes back to your numbers, right? And it doesn't have to be complicated. I do this myself. Like I said, I'm not huge on these budgeting tools. I look at my credit card statement, debit card, and I write down all my monthly bills, right? And then I look at it, and I'm about to do this again. And I haven't done it in about a month. What do you know how many? I think it's Rocket Money. I think it's Rocket Money. It used to be Truebill, where they'll help you go over things and see where you have all these subscriptions. I looked at some like I'm still paying for this. So I would say, first of all, do that, right? If you can look at where is your money going, right? And where can you cut from that? Like, I'll give you a crazy example because I'm sitting here right now and looking at my all-in-one printer that I'm supposed to be doing faxing, and I'm paying for a fax service monthly. That's $20. That's $20 times
Okay.
what a month, right?
Yeah.
$20 by annually. I could start putting that towards savings. Or you could buy a stock, right? You could do your research and say Chat GPT or just Google. Google uses Gemini and say, give me a list of stocks that are over, dividend paying stocks that are under $20. There you go.
Hmm.
It's the small things like that because I am sensitive to people. Been there, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. So how would you increase your income, right? You got to increase your income and decrease spending, and it has to be realistic. And within that, I would say, something I didn't always do, but I talked about a slush fund because this is not easy, right? And people get easily frustrated, and I understand that. A slush fund allows you to say, you know what, I've just had a horrible day. November 5th, I don't know what's going on. Oh, I know in my budget, I have that extra 20 in my wallet. I can have a go have a glass of Riesling. Or for me, my thing used to be go to the movies, right? And I
Hmm.
don't feel like, oh, I blew my budget out or I can't afford it. So I always add something, to my expense line for a slush fund, always, because you're going to
seventy
have those tough days.
dollars a week for a slush fund or a travel fund. Um,
Yeah.
that
What?
another quick piece of advice. Now, this is hard. This is not going to happen overnight. This is stuff, and you don't want to say you should have done this before. But people moving forward, okay, we're looking back now, end of the year. This is great for, like you say, look at your bills. What exactly are you
Mm-hmm,
paying for line by line? What is duplicated? What can
mm-hmm,
you eliminate? So you get a clear picture. Okay, this is where I am at the end of the year, and you can look forward to 2025. When you've done that, you're going to be realistic and say, okay, by the end of 2025, I want to have this much money, or I want to have hit this goal, or I want to manage expectations. And that it's going to take
mm-hmm,
discipline, but and
mm-hmm,
also because I know we have to wrap up by the hour. How can you do this and
mm-hmm.
not feel deprived?
Good question. I think the example I just gave you, you got to add a line item should be a slush fund. And I'm telling this is what I did so you don't feel deprived. Like you said, this is hard. It takes discipline. You may fall off the wall. And also you might see some hard truths. Well, I don't want to really give that up. I don't want to give that. Or like I've said with this back thing, my God, I should have cut that off like last year. Oh, I don't, it's really not a big deal. It's only $18 a month, right? But I think a slush fund or a movie fund or just you could name it whatever, but it has to be a line item on your expenses, right? It's an
So
expense,
I
right?
love that.
Something that you
So
budget
see,
for.
so that's see, I love that. So there you are. So that's like tough soft at the same time. You've got to
Mm-hmm,
look at your expenses, and you have got to include a slush fund,
mm-hmm.
a movie fund, or whatever you want to call it, fund, a Riesling fund,
Me fund,
whatever
right?
you
So you
want,
don't
a
because
me
you don't
fund.
feel deprived.
It's a
It's like weight
necessity.
loss. It's like weight loss. And
Yeah.
that's what other they do in other countries, right? Also, too, they save first. You have more and more people in the US doing that, but it took us a while to get here. They save first,
You
right?
know
So
what? It's so
savings is a
funny.
line item. Yeah,
Now you say
savings
in
is a line item.
Asia. Have you noticed
Yeah.
that in Europe as well?
I
I've
didn't
noticed.
really notice that. Good question. I didn't really notice that as much. I just know when I'm in Europe and living in Europe, and I've heard other people say that we always feel like we have a better quality of life, and your hand is not out for a lot of things, meaning you don't have to pay for a lot of things. It always seems like that. And I had this discussion with my family, and she was saying that she still feels she's been in the UK now 25 years. That the cost of living in the UK is still lower. Like she comes to visit her family in the States. She's like a loaf of bread is $6. So she said she always feels like that. The cost of bread, food, and things like that, and that's kind of the prevailing thought. But I'm trying to think if I've ever really spoken to even when I was banking, I set up an office in London about savings. That's a good question. I should put out to my European friends because I want to know the answer to that. Don't know.
Because I
Don't know.
know, yeah, depending on how you're raised in the African American community, you're taught to tithe,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
you're taught to. So there's some, even in families that don't talk about money, that might be the only thing that they'll talk about.
That's true. Save
that
money
you
and
need
it'll
to
save
tithe.
you.
Yeah.
Save for a rainy day, right? Save money and it'll save you. But like I said, in comparison to other countries, and again, like Asia, it's really driven by the multi-generational. I mean, people generations living under the same household and things like that. That's a big driver of it, right? Like my friends at work used to say, well, if I get fired, my family will take care of me. I'll just live with my family.
Well, you see that on the continent of Africa as well, at
Mm-hmm.
least where I've
Mm-hmm.
been. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother thing to talk about wealth and how they look at wealth and what you do. But you're right, how you live and in home ownership. I don't know if this is true that Italians are the wealthiest per capita when you look at it as far as the least amount of debt because they own their homes and they're basically passed down from generation to
I
generation more
never
so
heard
than any
that.
other country. Yeah, I
Oh my
don't know
God,
where I
I
read
never heard
that,
that.
but more so than any other country.
I
Um,
never heard that. Since I have to ask my Italian friend.
but
I never heard that. And I'm thinking Europe. I'm thinking, Europe, you may also have the whole there's no there's a whole idea of paying people a living wage. Right? I hear
you
Europeans
have
always say that
that,
American.
but debt. But I know in Sweden debt's a problem, and people because a lot of people it's similar to what happened in the States, but it's what happened in the States can never happen there because they're more regulated or I don't know. I don't want to say that human nature is different, but for example,
Hmm.
like I think my husband said, like I think maybe they used to have it, but now it's illegal to do reverse mortgages. Like the Swedish government's not letting people.
Right,
You can't
right,
do a
right.
reverse mortgage. You
You
can't do
put
that anymore.
guardrails. You put
Yeah, they're guardrails.
guardrails.
That's the term.
Right,
Thank you.
right. You
There's
put
certain
guardrail. Yeah,
guardrails, but there still are
yeah.
people that are in too much house. People get they're in too
Hmm.
much house. Interest rates have been crazy, and it's more the loan business for everyday loans and loans for people that don't really know loans. Like I get all kinds of texts, which I know are spam. Of
Mm.
course, they're spamming like, "Oh, about your loan," and I'm like, "Please, I'm not going for any loan." So a lot of that just throwing stuff out to see how what's gonna stick because a lot of people are thinking of
Yeah,
looking for loans, so they're just like getting numbers and spamming people, and who knows who they pick up. But so that's
yeah,
changed a lot in the 19 years since I, you know, moved to Sweden.
yeah.
That wasn't so people are getting into more financial responsibility than they can handle. And it's a
Mm.
problem and it's harder. It's ridiculous. It's almost impossible in Europe. Your friend can tell you this in the UK for anyone 30 to, buy a house without the bank
Yeah,
of mom and dad, even if you work
yeah,
at a fantastic job and you're saving. I mean, it's just ridiculous. House prices for what you get in Germany, my friend was showing me properties, at least a half a million
yeah.
euro, and what you get and still needs work and stuff. And so it's I don't know about Asia,
Global problem. That's why I
it's
said
a
global. And
global
I heard the same
problem.
thing. I heard the same thing in the UK. These are global problems. It's happening everywhere.
It's
You
happening
know.
everywhere. Now we've got 4 minutes. I want to make sure you covered everything.
Hmm.
Because also one thing, and I really appreciate you talking about people that don't have any money because it's a mindset.
No, it
Because
is.
if
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's
it's
it's a
hard.
mindset.
You got to really look at yourself. It's that's a tough one. Living paycheck to paycheck. You don't see any way out. It's a hard one, Adrian. You don't see anyone
It's a
at way
hard
out.
one.
You're not getting ahead. You seem to be falling behind. It's a tough place to be.
I don't want to say it's just a mindset. It's a reality. But when I say it's a
It is
mindset, yeah,
right.
to
It's a
say that you're
reality.
stuck, that can keep you stuck. That's where the
Right. No, I
mindset.
understand what you're saying. It's like people talk about, oh, poverty mentality, but if you aren't making enough income, you could be below the poverty level. So you have to find ways to increase your income, decrease your expenses. It's getting harder and harder to decrease your expenses. That's what I think. It's getting harder. I am sensitive to some of the people who said my HOA went up twice and food. It's getting harder. And you listen to these economists, they're like, prices aren't going to come down. That's not going to happen.
So,
People waiting in the US for 50-cent eggs. Good luck on that.
well, so some more advice is reduce your expenses, increase your income. If it's possible to do multi-generational living or look at your living
Mm-hmm.
situation.
That's a good one. That's a good one. It's a good one, and it's taking hold again. Not easy, but I don't think
Not
there's any.
definitely not easy.
We're entering a time when we're going to have to make tough decisions again. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, they're going to be tough decisions for everybody. If some of these things start to happen, they're going to be tough decisions to be made, and you want to be ready. You want to be hitting 2025, saying, I can make these decisions, which leads me to I was going to start this way, but it's a good way to end, with wellness. I always look at wellness. I always go total wellness. I have it in my affirmation cards: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. And I will add now social, because it's community. We're all in this together. And then also financial, and also work from a place of intention. What are your intentions? What are your financial goals? And gratitude. Be grateful for what you have, right? There's my dad, both my parents, especially my dad, grew up in the segregated South. There's always someone who's worse off than you are, right? So be grateful every day for what you have, and everything is a lesson. I do believe there's abundance everywhere. We may not always, see it, right? Oh my God, we're abundance, but you have to really kind of dig deep. But you said something important before too, in financial wellness, but you got to have financial goals. That'll look different for everybody, especially if you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole, you're living the paycheck. And also, I would like to say, some people don't like to start small. They go, oh, I don't want to start putting pennies in a jar or 5 cents a day or some of these other challenges I see. That can make a difference. And I kind of would like to say, I like those actually, the financial challenges where you do like $1 a day or 50 cents a day. And the other thing and final thing, start where you are. Start exactly where you are today. No, oh, I wish I had more and I'll start saving. Start where you are today. It's something I also tell expats moving overseas. Oh, I don't have this. And where do I start? Where you are today, right? On your financial wellness journey. And I guess I'll end with that.
Wow, as always, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm totally pumped, you know, thinking, this is the time of the year when I look through all my expenses and see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get
Mm-hmm.
to do it with a renewed sense of purpose. Um,
That's right.
and thank you for all those nuggets. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the website?
The best one is Living a Global Lifestyle, which needs to be updated, but I really like it when people send me an email to info@livingaglobalLifestyle.com. You can join the group Living a Global Lifestyle on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, Living a Global Life. I've been doing a little bit more TikTok and getting more engagement, but I like it when people send me emails. That's cool. That's fine. Or send me on Messenger, hey, I heard you speak and I have a question about that. Next year, I mean, not trying, I'm intending to get these digital products out the door. And next year, I really kind of want to bump up to doing consultations. This year, I did a lot of speaking, which is great. I do this solo, so it's hard for me to kind of do some of the social media and other things. And I really kind of don't want to be an influencer. I consider myself an educator and a resource. So like somebody suggested, why don't you just go on the podcast tour, then get your message out that way. So we'll see. We'll see. But that's how you can reach me if anybody has any questions. Adrian, I have a couple of things, like I said, I want to put, and I'll send it to you. And if you want to put it in a group, of course it's fine. Always happy to help Black women in
Thank
Europe. Not a problem.
Whoa, fantastic. Thank you. We met in Europe.
Hmm.
There was a European woman, Black woman, who said, I have to meet you. You were on your way from Paris to Stockholm.
Hmm.
And
That's
so,
it.
yeah, so I'll be in touch, Sherry. Take
All
care.
right, I'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm sorry I could only, but you got to take care of your health. I've had these horrible allergy things, so I'm doing the allergy testing. So we're gonna go test
No,
them.
no, take care of your health. Yeah, take care of your health. Absolutely. Love you, babes.
All
Thanks for
right.
taking the time.
I love you too. I'll talk to you soon, my love. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hey, we hope you enjoyed that episode from season 4, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, be well.